In this screencast, I'm going to show you how you can get up and running with Android Bootstrap with free open source tools in just a few minutes. A couple of the things that we're going to need to have set up on your system in order to work with Android Bootstrap are going to be the Android SDK. We're going to be using Maven. We need to set up a couple of environment variables. And we'll also be working with IntelliJ. I recommend using IntelliJ for building and working with Android Bootstrap, as it makes life a whole lot easier. So let's go ahead and hop in here and get started. The first thing that we need to do is make sure that you have the Android SDK installed. The Android SDK can be downloaded from developer.android.com/SDK. You'll need to install version code 16 and version code 8. However, I recommend just downloading and installing all the available SDKs that you have. So in the future, if you need to work with a different SDK or you target a different one, you don't have to worry about downloading it again. It's much easier if you just download it the first time. However, if you only need to download a couple of them just to fulfill the project needs, you'll need to download version code 8 and version code 16. Why is that determined? Because the app inside of the Android manifest has a minimum SDK version of 8 here, shown on line 9, and we're going to target the SDK version 16. So we need to have those two installed at the bare minimum. The next thing that we're going to need to have installed is Maven. Now Maven is a project type management tool, which can also be used to manage dependencies, can manage different types of build configurations, can do a whole bunch of different types of things. You'll need to install Maven onto your system, and you can get that from maven.apache.org, and it'll take you to the site. On the left hand side here, you can go download the latest version. You'll need version 3. Here we have version 3.0.4. Go ahead and download the binary and follow through the instructions to install Maven on your system. Once you have Maven installed, what you will need to do is set a couple of environment variables. The first environment variable that you're going to need to set is M2 Home. This is the variable you see here on line 2. It's the same inside of Windows XP, as you've seen up here on number 2 in the Windows XP or the Windows installation, M2 Home. You're also going to need a couple of other environment variables as well. These environment variables include, this is a capture of my bash profile in my OS X machine. I have Java installed in library/Java Home, so I need the Java Home environment variable. I need the M2 Home environment variable, and I need 3 Android environment variables to work with Android. We need Android Home, Android SDK, and Android Tools. Depending upon how you've set up or installed Android and at what time, depending upon the tooling, some of these may have already been created for you for the Android SDK. If not, you'll just want to double check that they have been created. After you create your environment variables, you may need to restart your system depending upon your operating system. The M2 Home variable allows us to see where the Maven home directory is located, and the same for Java. Once you have your environment variables set up, you'll need to add them to your path. And you can do that as seen here on line 116. We're going to add Maven to the path. We're also going to add the Android Tools to the path. Add M2 Home to the path. The next thing that we need to work with is the IDE of choice. In this case, I work with IntelliJ. And IntelliJ has a free version which I've used for the last 2 years called the Community Edition. Android Bootstrap was built using the Community Edition, and so you can download it here. It's a free installation, it works already with Android, and you can also work with other types of language such as Groovy and Scala and so forth. Once you have IntelliJ installed, we'll be able to get up and running. Before we do so, however, let's go ahead and build Android Bootstrap. To get Android Bootstrap, you'll need to go to androidbootstrap.com, or you can go to github.com/donfelker/android-bootstrap, and you can download the files here. There's also a link directly on androidbootstrap.com. You can either clone this Git repository to your local machine, or you can just go ahead and download it as a zip file. Let's go ahead and assume that you've downloaded the files as a zip file. Let's go ahead and unzip those files and navigate to them. Here I've downloaded them into my downloads folder. I'm now inside of my Android Bootstrap folder, and we see that we have a folder called Android Bootstrap Master. This is because I've downloaded from the master branch. Here we have various different folders. We have the app, we have the properties file, integration test folder, the pom.xml, and the ProGuard file. To get running with Android Bootstrap, just to see if we can build it from the command line, what we'll need to do is issue a Maven command. We're going to issue mvn clean package. What this will do is look for a pom.xml file which contains all the dependencies and the information on how to build Android Bootstrap. The first time you run this, your screen will actually look a little bit different than this, as all of the dependencies will be downloaded onto your local M2 cache. The M2 cache is stored inside of your users directory in a .m2 folder. This is where all the dependencies are stored when you download and use Maven. So each time you then build again from within inside of Maven or inside of IntelliJ, instead of including the actual jars that you need, such as for Action Bar Sherlock, RoboJuice, JSON, and the various other libraries that we use inside of Android Bootstrap, these files will be installed into your M2 cache. So the first time you run this, all the files have to be downloaded from online, and they're put into your M2 cache. Each subsequent build uses your local cache to speed up development. Here we can see that the tests are being run on the screen on the command line prompt. So it's run through, built the application, it's run a couple of tests. The tests have run, it's skipped one test for one that may have been ignored. And now it's actually going through and generating the file, generating the jar, and here we are now generating the APK file. And at the end, we now have a success. This means that our Android application has been built. What we can do is we can actually cd into the app directory, or we can just use a Explorer type of window. Let's go into the app. Now there's a folder here called Target. If we look inside of Target, we'll actually see a file, an APK that's been built for us. We could take this, use ADB, and install it manually if we want to. The Target directory is basically the build working directory where various different things happen for the build. The classes are generated, ProGuarding, different types of replacements may be done, all kinds of different stuff happens inside of Target. This is just a temporary file that we do not need to check into any source control. This is just where all the work is done for the Maven build. And the output is placed inside the Target directory. And here's the file, Android Bootstrap -1.0. This is signed with the debug key, so this isn't something you'd want to release to the Android market. If we go back inside of the command line, we can see inside the app, see inside of Target, and we can see all the various files in here. We can see the APK, the jar that was built, classes, the dex files, any of the libs, so forth of that nature. Notice one thing. Let's go back up one directory. Whoops. We will see here that we still have our Android manifest, our POM, res, source, and target directories. We do not have a libs directory. Remember that all of our dependencies are stored in our M2 cache. If we go into our users directory, and on OS X that will be ~/.m2, which looks like this, and inside of Windows it'll be in your users directory for your username .m2. You'll see that we have a repository folder here, and inside the repository folder we have various different other folders based upon Android package names. So in this instance, there's various different things that are used here in various applications that I've built. There's OAuth, regex, velocity, things from Android. We can do it on a COM. We can go see things that are Action Bar Sherlock is in here. Google is inside of here. We have AdMob. We have Android things, analytics, maps, and various different types of other jars and so forth. This is where all the jars are going to be stored. So if we take a look at Android, we can see all the different types of, there's various jars included inside of the M2 cache that have been downloaded online. Remember, the first time you build the Maven project, it's going to take a few minutes to build because it's got to download all these jars. The next time you build, it's going to take quite a bit shorter amount of time. The next thing you want to do is you're going to want to open up IntelliJ. So let's go ahead and open up IntelliJ. I've already have it open. And what we want to do is we want to click Open Project. Now we're going to actually navigate to our Downloads folder, or wherever you may have downloaded or cloned your repository. I've already unzipped the file again. This is Android Bootstrap Master. The first thing I'm going to do is click on the pom.xml file and click Choose. So notice how I didn't choose the folder or anything. I chose the pom.xml file. IntelliJ works very well with various different Maven installations. Notice an error popped up on the top right hand screen a moment ago. And this one right here, same error. This is a small issue right now with IntelliJ 12. When you first open up the application, for some reason it doesn't recognize the wishlist library. I'll show you how we can fix that in a second. Our application has now been opened inside of IntelliJ. On the left hand side here we have our app folder, our integration tests. If we expand the app folder, we'll see we have the manifest, our source, our res directory, the same type of thing that you would see in another IDE. On the right hand side, let's go ahead and open up the Maven projects folder. And we see we have various different buttons up here. We can configure Maven to work what we may need to work it with. Hit refresh here. This will refresh any of the Maven information here. We see that we have an error here with the wishlist library. You may also encounter an error where it says Action Bar Sherlock cannot find a suitable version for Android, or another library can't find something for Android. We can go ahead and fix that by going to File, Project Structure, and then we're going to look at our modules. We have various different modules in here. We have Android Bootstrap. We see that's SDK set to 4.1. Android, for example, if you had an error and maybe the module was not set to an Android platform, Action Bar Sherlock set to 4 here, you could select a different one. Same thing for the wishlist library, so let's just go ahead and set that to 4. View Page Indicator is already set to 1.6, so that'll work. And everything else should be ready to go. We can go ahead and click OK. And then you'll see it indexing down here at the bottom. What the indexing is doing is allowing us to use certain commands inside of IntelliJ to float around the application. So let's go ahead and build it. We're going to go up to Build, Make Project. What this is going to do is go ahead and compile the Android application and make sure everything does compile and works accordingly. It looks like we have an error here. Let's go ahead and open up Project Structure. Let's go down to Action Bar Sherlock. Let's set this to 4.1. GitHub 4.1. And we'll see if this does it. We had the wrong Android version selected inside of the project structure, so we changed this to Android 4.1 to build it. So you see it's not a quick up and running process. We just have to get a few things set. The application is now building, as we can see here, Android Bootstrap. We can navigate around while the application is building. We can come take a look at some of the code. See inside of core, we see the avatar loader, we see the news screen perhaps. This is going to be a Pojo that handles all the news screen. We can take a look at the user object. This is some of the user information that's used inside of the application. User agent provider, Bootstrap service provider. Upon successful completion of the compilation, down at the bottom part of the screen, we will see that it will say compilation completed with 100 errors about 1 minute ago. Now, we see we have a new compilation completed successfully with 22 warnings, and everything is looking good. So what we can do now, if we want to install this on a device, we need to edit some run configurations. Hit Edit Run Configurations, we'll create a new one, Android application. Let's go ahead and call this Bootstrap. I like to prefix them for what they're going to be used for, USB. The module we want to execute is the Android Bootstrap one. If we selected the integration test, that would be for the test, but we do not want to work with the test, we want to work with the actual app. Launch a default activity, we want it to deploy. We want it to do the currently connected USB device, and before the launch we want it to make the application, so we want it to compile. So let's hit OK. Now we can go up to Run and run Android Bootstrap USB. So we can see here that IntelliJ is just waiting for ADB. It's going to connect to ADB. It's going to start making. Down here in the window we can see the compilation process, and then you can see that it's waiting for the device, which is a currently connected device, is a Galaxy Nexus. To display them, let's go ahead and get the projector set up. So here I'm displaying the actual Galaxy Nexus device I've connected to my screen via a tool called Droid at Screen. Pretty much just an ADB screen scrape and displays it to the end screen here. So we can actually swipe over to the screen. You'll see that we're on news now. Go to users, check-ins. This has now been installed directly from IntelliJ. You can come inside of IntelliJ, change a few things around. Let's maybe go into the UI and change one of the adapters here. Let's go to the carousel. Activity, and then we want to see the Bootstrap pager adapter, and let's say we want to, instead of it saying users on the first screen, let's just change this to people comment that out. And now what we can do is we can go to run, and we hit run again. And what this will do is we'll actually use a locally cached version, checking to see if anything's been changed, and we'll build everything inside of the application much quicker inside of IntelliJ and then redeploy it to the device. So let's go back and take a look at our screen here. We can see behind us in IntelliJ that it's still building, it's executing, indexing the Android application. So the application is getting killed off now. So start back up. We have Android Bootstrap, and now instead of the top part saying users, it now says people. So we've now changed some code, redeployed, and we have now seen the changes all through IntelliJ. A couple of the settings inside of Maven that you might want to be interested in. In the Maven window here, you can open up the window on the side and go to Maven, expand Maven, and then in the importing section, I recommend downloading the sources and documentation for all of the projects that you have. If you do that, you'll need to go ahead and hit refresh. What this will allow you to do is if you're using an open source library such as Wishlist or View Page Indicator or anything of that nature, you'll be able to go ahead and check out the documentation for each one of those and the source code. So we can go check out Robo Sherlock fragment activity. We now have the code. We can see up at the top here that it's up in a jar, but the source has been downloaded. We can see what that is actually of. Notice anytime we're in a different library, the tab is a different color. These are lighter, and this is kind of this is lighter, this is a little bit darker, but they're always a little bit different. Your IntelliJ installation, you may be using the default white theme. I'm using the dark theme, so it'll look a little bit different. So that should get you up and running with Android Bootstrap.
What is going on, guys? My name is Bucky, and welcome to your very first Bootstrap tutorial. Now, the first question you may have is, what the heck is Bootstrap? Well, Bootstrap is a way that you can make awesome looking websites for every single device. Now, whenever you guys first started learning how to make websites, my guess is that you probably designed it for the desktop and then you tried to look at it on a phone and you're like, everything is really tiny, I gotta zoom in, I'm trying to click a link with my thumb, but it's accidentally clicking the wrong link, and it's just a pain. So then you might have been like, alright, I'll just design it for mobile first. So you did that, and then you looked at it on a desktop, and all the buttons were huge, white space was out of control, and it was just a pain in the butt. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, what kind of design looks good on a 27-inch iMac and also a tiny little mobile phone? Well, the answer is Bootstrap. So that's pretty much the broad overview of what Bootstrap is and why it's so popular. Now, what else do we got down here? Alright, so if you go to this site, getbootstrap.com, you can look at a couple demo websites that were made using Bootstrap. And look at this girl right here. I think that she thinks that this guy is trying to take a picture of her, but he's just like on Google Maps, not even paying attention to her. So, alright, getting kind of sidetracked here, but in order to use Bootstrap, we need to download some files and include them in our project. So, again, go to this site, getbootstrap.com, and click this big jumbo download Bootstrap button. Now it's going to take you to this page, and as you can see, we have a couple different options of how we want to include those files in our project. So the first thing that we can do is click this button, download them. And by the way, don't click it yet because I'm going to show you guys a better way. But if you want, you can download the files so you have a copy on your own computer. And then if you go to your downloads, extract them, extract all of them, and check them out. So these are the files that you would include in every single project. So every single time you made a project, copy them, include them, make another one, copy them, include them. It can be kind of redundant and kind of a pain in the butt. So what I'm going to recommend is doing it this way. So whenever you decide to make a Bootstrap website, you can just add these links right here. And whenever you include these links, what it's going to do is it's going to pull all of those files from the CDN. Now a CDN is just a content delivery network, and all this is a server online that has the files stored on it. So you actually don't need them on your own machine. You can just say, okay, I'm going to link to these files. Then whenever the user browses your website, it downloads those files, and you're good to go. And by the way, I don't know why they call it a CDN. for some reason, whenever people are making like something new with computers, they find the need to give everything a new name and acronym. You know what a content delivery network is? It's the freaking internet. It's a big network and they deliver content, but okay, it's my little rant, so getting kind of off track here. Anyways, in these tutorials, what I'm going to be doing is, instead of including all of these files, then I'm just going to be including these links right here. And also, what I did already is I made a really simple template where I did all that, and I'm going to be putting it on my GitHub page. So if you go to my GitHub page, and there's a link right below this video, anytime you want to make a Bootstrap website, just copy the template, and this can be your starting point. So we're going to be writing most of our code right here, and that way you don't have to go find those links and set everything up every single time. And by the way, if you guys are using JetBrains or IntelliJ or any IDE that JetBrains made, if you want a real easy way to set up a Bootstrap website, you can just go to File, New Project, and then if you go to Static Web, this Twitter Bootstrap is your template that you can use. Or you can just use mine from GitHub. Whatever you want to do, follow your heart. So before I get into the good stuff, showing you guys all the different features that you can add, I want to talk to you about these files right here. So we already know what most of this stuff is, just regular HTML. The first interesting line is this. Now, you really don't have to worry about this, but just so you guys are pros and understand every single thing, a viewport is essentially just the user's screen. And the two settings that we're changing right here is, for the device width, we're just going to use the width of the screen. So nothing, mind-blowing. And initial scale, this means don't zoom in or zoom out any special way. Just use regular zoom, 100%, and this just makes sure that it's consistent across every device. Now, this line of code right here, this is just a CSS file where we get all of the, default styling, coloring, all the look of all the different widgets. And these files are, one of them is for jQuery, the standard jQuery library, and the other one is actually the Bootstrap JavaScript file. So again, that's what all of these are, and this is going to be our starting point on every single Bootstrap webpage that we make. Alright, so now that we got all that boring stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the fun stuff and start designing our website. So every single thing that I'm going to be showing you guys in these tutorials, it needs to go inside a container. Now, there are two different types of containers, and what one you choose is dependent on, do you want your website to have a fixed width, or do you want it to take up the full screen? So if you want it to have a fixed width, then the class you use is container. If you want it to take up the entire width of the device, then you use container/fluid. Not fluid, fluid. So this would be full screen, but for this demo, I'm just going to use container, and then I'll show you guys the difference. So for right now, let's just make something really simple. I'll say like welcome to the New Boston. That'll be my site. And for the paragraph, I'll just say like, I love the New Boston. My name is Bucky. Alright, so let me just save this and run it and check it out. So there you go. Congratulations. You now know how to make the most simple Bootstrap website that has ever been created. And now that we have a solid foundation and know how to set up our project and what everything is, we can start getting into all the features, all of the cool design elements. It's going to be awesome. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Alrighty, Hasses, welcome back. And in this video, I am going to teach you guys how to design layouts using the grid system in Bootstrap. Now, a grid, as we know, is made up of a bunch of rows, left and right, and columns, up and down. Now, whenever we use Bootstrap, we can have a maximum of 12 columns. Now, this doesn't mean that every single web page that we make, it has to be 12 columns and look like a big grid. We can actually take these 12 columns, and if we just want one big one, we can just group them all together. And also, let's say that you just wanted to have a sidebar on the left hand side in your main area. Well, we can like take 2 of those columns, group them together, put them on the left, and we can take the 10 other ones and use them for the main content right here. But remember, 12, it's our magic number. Now, another thing I want to point out, and this is the last terminology that I'm going to throw at you guys before we start actually getting hands-on. Whenever we're using our grid system, it has 4 different classes. Let me just type all these out. XS, SM, MD, and LG. So extra small, small, medium, and large, that's what they stand for. And these relate to what device are you trying to design your website for. So extra small is for phones, small is for tablets, medium is for normal desktops and laptops, and large is for larger desktops like those huge iMacs. Now, later on, what we're going to be doing is, let's say that you want to create a layout that, I don't know, let's say a desktop, you want to have a layout that the sidebar only takes up 2 columns, but for a tablet, you think it looks better if, you know, your sidebar takes up 4 columns. You can actually use these classes to change it, but in these first couple examples, and for the most of my tutorials, I'm just going to make one generic website that's responsive to every single device. So we can just use, say, like MD, and I'm going to show you how to make a website that looks good on every, you know, single device, whether it's a phone or, you know, a big jumbo desktop. So let's get into that right now. So let's say that what can we do in this video? We'll say that we're making a really simple web page, and it's going to have 3 columns, and it's going to take up the entire width of the screen. So how would we do that? Well, remember, the first thing we need to do is change this from container, which is a fixed width, to container fluid. Now remember, that is going to give us the functionality to take up the entire width of the screen. And also, let me add a header. So heading 1, I'll just say 3 column layout. Now whenever you make columns, they have to go inside rows. So div, and the class for this is just row. So now inside this row, we're just going to stick 3 columns. And remember, since we have to take up 12 columns and we only want 3 of them, we're going to have each of those take up 4 columns. So 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. Simple enough. So div class equals col minus md, since we're just going to make this a generic, you know, website for a desktop, and then minus 4. So we're just making a regular column that's going to span 4 columns. I know I use the word columns a lot, but that's what it's doing. It's taking up the width of 4 columns. And just so we can differentiate these, I'm just going to change the background color of each one. It'll be easier to see in this little demo. So background color, got to find my shortcut, too lazy to type it. And what's a good color? So FF, I don't know, like 9999. And this one can just say first. So let me copy this and just add it 2 more times. Alright, so this is going to be the first column. On the left hand side, this one's going to be the one in the middle. So I'll actually just write left, middle, and right. And let me just change the color to, I don't know, 99CCFF. And what else is a good color? 00CC99. And let me run this and check it out. Alright, so there you go. Here is our heading right here. And remember, since we use a fluid container, it's taking up the entire screen. So left, middle, right, this is all one row with 3 columns. And check out what happens whenever I shrink this. Huh, that's pretty handy. I mean, we didn't add any functionality so it, you know, all stacked on top of each other. But, I mean, a phone is about that size, let's say. Everything is all there, nothing gets squished. This middle and right section aren't getting cut off. They are still right there. And check that out. Pretty awesome, eh? And real quick, let me show you guys what it looks like if it is a regular container instead of fluid. So let me run this and check it out. So here is our fluid one, and we can see that this takes up the full width of the screen, no space on the left or right. And this is the regular container. You see that we now have a fixed width, and we have some spacing on the left and right. So full screen, not full screen, that's the difference, and that is how you use the grid system to make a really simple layout. Alrighty hosses, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use some of the default text styling that's built right into Bootstrap. Now, actually I'll write all of them and I'll just stick them all on one page, so then when you go to my GitHub page you can just copy whatever you want, and I don't know, I think it'll be easier than breaking them down into a bunch of files. But the first one I want to show you guys is highlighting. So I'll say you can highlight words or text using the mark tags. Now anytime you want to highlight a certain chunk of text, then you just use this element right here, mark. So mark, and I hate when it does that. It auto-completes when I don't want it to auto-complete, and whenever I do, it doesn't pop up. Now this actually might be a little hard to see since it's gonna highlight it in yellow. Let me run this and check it out. So I don't know if you guys can see this on YouTube, but this chunk right here, it has a yellow tint. If you can't, then trust me, it's a lot easier to see whenever you're looking at it in person. So that's highlighting. Another cool thing is using quotes. So if I use block quote, inside here, say that we were quoting someone wise, such as my grandpa. So my grandpa said, "Sometimes I wet the bed on purpose." He did tell me that. I'm not lying. And for the footer, we can just, quote him or attribute him. So my grandpa. So now whenever you run this, so this gives us the appearance of a quote by adding a little indentation and also this line on the left, and also the size and coloring in this little dash. It did it all for us, made it super easy. Now another thing that I use a lot is a list. So let me give it a header actually. What can we make a list of? Maybe things to do when you're bored. Let me actually give myself a little bit more space. I like to be able to scroll a little bit. Alright, so what are we going to do when we're bored? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a list, DL. Now, I actually break this up into indoors and outdoors. So what can you do indoors? Well, let me indent this. Well, the first thing that you can do is take a nap. Don't want to put too much effort in this. You definitely don't want to work or do anything productive. And what else can you do when you're bored inside? Watch Netflix for 8 hours. By the way, Orange is the New Black came out on Netflix today, season number 3. So, goodbye weekend. That's what I'm going to be doing. Alright, now let me just add one more list, and I'll say outdoors. I'll show you guys how cool this looks. So DD, what can you do when you're bored and you're outdoors? You can go back inside, because you shouldn't be outdoors doing any physical activity. You should be inside playing on the computer. And this is what a list looks like. Pretty sweet. Check it out. Alright, now let's see what else we got. Whenever you're doing code, for example, you want to do some syntax highlighting. I don't know, maybe you're trying to make the next big GitHub, or maybe you're making some documentation for an API. You have a couple different options that you can do. So I'll say that I was writing some documentation for a tutorial. To set the user's weight, set user weight. What's my weight? 374 pounds. And I'll say with an integer. Alright, so whenever you're going to use code, then what you should do is you should use the code tags right there. Now if I just highlight this and drag the code you want to highlight in and run it, this is what you get. And I know you've seen these on a bunch of different sites before. Let me actually add a semicolon to that. I don't know why, it just bothered me. So the default code styling is this light pink background, and it uses monospace font, and the text is like dark pink. But whenever someone sees this, they realize that this is source code, so that's one option that you can use. Now, another thing I want to point out is this. The code tags, they aren't really good for multi-line code. So if you ever have more than one line or like more than, a little chunk of text, then you probably want to use the pre-tags. So let me just say multi-line code, use the pre-tags. Alright, so inside here, hold on, my freaking cord for my headphones getting all tangled up in me. So for n in range 101, I'll just write some Python real quick. Then, I don't know, what condition can we make? If n modulus 4 is 0, then we'll just do like print n. Again, this code doesn't mean anything at all, and you don't need semicolons in Python, so check it out. So as you can see, we have some pre-formatted text, and the reason that this is spaced so far to the left is because this is spaced so far to the left and it just reads it directly. But if you highlight it all, and if you hold shift and tab, I don't know if you guys knew this, but that means reverse tab or take away the tabs. So that's not a real Bootstrap related bit of information, but it's pretty handy. So again, this is much easier to read than this right here. So for a little snippet, use the code tags. For multi-line code, use the pre-tags, and this stands for pre-formatted text. Now, one other thing I want to mention that is kind of code related. There's another thing that you're going to see, and it's called KBD. This stands for keyboard input. Now, I really don't like this because I think it just looks stupid, but this is supposed to be keyboard input. So for example, if you are saying like giving instructions to a user and they're supposed to do something like hold down Control Alt Delete, then you can stick them inside the KBD tag. So Control plus Alt plus Delete, or some kind of code or whatever. Now if we run this, then it kind of looks like the code tags in the sense that it's monospace code, but I don't know. I don't really see this that often. Apparently a black background and white text is supposed to resemble keyboard input for some reason. You can just use the code tags. That's probably what I would do, but follow your heart. Now the last couple of things I want to mention are this, two little elements. Whenever you use Bootstrap, it comes with predefined contextual colors. Now these are just colors that are used for, let's say whenever the user does something correctly, like fills out a form, then we probably want to show green text, since green resembles success, and whenever they mess something up or we give them an error, then we're going to have some red text. Now instead of just going out and picking these colors, Bootstrap already included the standard colors for you. So let me just add a quick heading so it might make it look a little bit easier. So I'll say built-in colored classes. And whenever I stick this on my GitHub page, I'll add comments and make everything a little bit prettier so everything isn't jumbled together. But for now, I just want to show you guys some real quick examples. So the class for one of these is, let's say that, show you guys a bunch of different ones. So text muted is, think of it like disabled or like not clickable. And I'll just say text muted, and this is just going to be a light gray. So the default text is black or very close to black. This is going to be grayed out text. And I'll show you guys two other ones, even though that there are a couple more. So success, I'll say like congrats, you filled out that form correctly. And one other one is text minus danger, and this is going to be red, and we'll just say like danger text. We'll keep it real boring. Now if I run this, check it out. So without setting any colors manually, you see that, alright, that class is grayed, this one, the success one is green, and this is red. So that way we can keep these classes on every single page without having to include, any custom CSS classes. And also, these classes, they're the same for the background colors too. So in order to get a background color of, let's say, green or red, all we do instead of text is we change this to BG. So BG success means a green background, BG danger means a red background, and check it out. So, alright, so I guess it wasn't, red, it was a little bit pink, but that is what it does. So again, there are some very common text styles, in other words, typography, as some people say, and there's a lot of other text classes and different things that you can do, but now that we know the basics of it, it's time to move on to something else, and that would be tables. That's what we're going to be talking about in the next video. I'll see you then. Alrighty, hosses, the next thing I want to talk to you about are tables. Now, you can actually have a bunch of different tables, and I'm going to be showing you guys a couple different ones. But for now, this thing autocorrects on me like different every single time. It's kind of ticking me off. About to drop kick my computer. Alright, so I first want to show you guys a simple table, and then I'm going to show you a condensed table and a straight table. And there are a couple other ones, but if you just want to look at the documentation, once you learn the basics of how they work, then it's probably a little bit easier. So anytime you make a table, you got to set its class. The generic class is just table. And inside the table, you're going to have a bunch of rows, and in those rows, you can make your columns. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to separate this into a table head and the table body. Now, the table head is good whenever you just want to label the columns so you actually know what, the information in your table is about. So inside here, this is where we're going to make the rows. If I can type, are you serious? Oh my God. Alright, now inside your rows, see that? Pops up at the stupidest freaking time. I'm really getting kind of ticked off. Not that ticked off though. I think I'm overreacting a little bit. Alright, so we'll have a column for name, and we'll say that this is, I don't know, a game, and we're storing the user's points. Sounds like a pretty random idea, but hey, that's what I'm going with. Now, after the head, you can make the body, so T-body, and you just have regular table rows in here, and inside your table rows, you have a bunch of data. So the first one will be, what's the name of the first person? Bucky Roberts. That sounds like a pretty cool dude. And then, what's the next column? Age and points. So how old am I? I am actually 74 years old. And how many points do I have in whatever the heck game we're playing? 8,760. I'm pretty good at this game. And let's see, let's have one other, actually let's have two other people. This guy could be Turd McGurd. That sounds like a realistic person, and he or she is 13 and they only have 5 points. They suck. And let's have one more so we actually have some cool data to look at. This is I don't know. It's a foreign name, but that's all I could think of right now. And they are 18, and they also, actually, let's give them 32 points. Alright, so that's your basics of a table. Now if I run this, check it out. So this is your generic table. Here's your header, and there is all your data. And now let me show you guys the difference between this. Actually, let's tighten this up a little bit. And we'll keep this one too. So the other one, what can I show you next? I'll say condensed. Now, I actually like condensed tables a lot. They're my favorite because if you look at this one, everything's kind of big and spaced out. And whenever you have a table, you're usually looking at some kind of data and you want to see it, you know, kind of tight together. At least I do. So condensed, and might as well create the other one right now. And this is striped. I'll show you guys what that does. Alright, so as you can see, I messed something up, and that is because, yep, I need to put the name table and then copy that, because we're actually using two classes. So this first class just says, okay, this is a bootstrap table, and the second one says, how do you want to style it, overriding the default styling. Now hopefully this works, and there we go. So this first one is just your generic one. That's your starting point. I don't know if you guys can really tell the difference, but the condensed table right here, it has half the padding of this. So I just like it because it's a little bit easier to read when all these elements are kind of grouped together, bunched together a little bit tighter. And this last one, I don't know if you guys could tell, but these rows have a little tint to them. So this one's kind of gray, this is white gray, and they would alternate if I had some more. So when you have a huge list of items in your table, it's a little bit easier to differentiate between each individual row. So there you go. That is what tables are, and if we can see what happens whenever we condense this, well, it looks good on any size device. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, you now know how to make tables, and there are also a couple other classes aside from condensed and striped, so I recommend that you go check those out on the Bootstrap website. But for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Alrighty, hosses, in this video, I want to talk to you about responsive and non-responsive images and the difference between the two, and also how to embed responsive videos so they don't look horrible on your website. Now, before we get to responsive and non-responsive, I'm just going to show you guys some really basic image classes and some styling that you can do with them. And the first one is image, and I have two images that I imported. Here is one called ladies.jpg, and here's another one. This is me when I was I don't know, like in 3rd grade or something. Look at those chompers right there. Those are some beautiful that's exactly what I look like now, by the way. I did not change one bit. Alright, so the source of this first image, let's go ahead and use that teeth one. Teeth.jpg, and that's in my images directory. Teeth.jpg. What a name. Alright, so let's say that we wanted to round the corners of this. Well, there's a built-in class, and this is called image rounded. Now, whenever you stick these on a website, let's say a social networking website, you usually want to give it a set width and height so they don't appear at weird proportions. Now, all of the images on my social network are 230 by 230. So, actually, let me just go ahead and make both of these at once. So this is going to make an image that's 230 wide by 230 tall, and the corners are going to be slightly rounded. Now, for some reason, it's the trend to have images that are completely circle now, especially profile images. So in order to get that effect, use the class image circle. So if I run this, check it out. So this is the first one with slightly rounded corners, and you see these circular ones a lot on, like I said, a bunch of different social networks. Google Plus is doing it. I really like just plain old square images, but whatever floats your boat, there you go. Now, another thing I want to mention is, what is the difference between a responsive and a non-responsive image? Now, let me go ahead and just delete these completely. Alright, so for this, let me go ahead and use images, ladies.jpg, and let's just go ahead and make the responsive one first. So anytime you want your image to be responsive, use the class image responsive. Now what this is going to do is whenever you shrink your screen, or you're just looking at on a small screen and the image is wider than the screen, then it's going to shrink with it. Kind of confusing, but it's easy to see what's going on whenever I put a non-responsive image, and you just do that by getting rid of this class. So this is a Bootstrap class that makes your images responsive, and this is just, a plain old image. So now let me run this and I'll show you guys. So at first, alright, not that big a deal, nothing's really different, but look what happens whenever I start to shrink this. And this is going to resemble a smaller screen like a tablet or a phone. So I'm shrinking it, and as you can see, the top one that's responsive, it's shrinking along with the device. So on a phone or a tablet, this would still look great. Now down here, look what happens. The image just gets cut off, because if it's like, hey, I'm longer than the screen, don't care, you can just chop half of me off. I mean, oops, embarrassing. So you clearly always want to use responsive images whenever you are working with Bootstrap, unless you want to go with that half of your image cut off effect, which no one ever does. Now the last thing I want to do is show you guys how to make videos responsive, and I already have this one pulled up. So grab any video on YouTube and get the code. So if you look at V equals, all of it after it is the video code. It's pretty much the ID for the video, and I'll show you how to make videos responsive. Now the first thing you need to do is you need to make a div, and the div's class is going to be embed responsive, and embed responsive 16 by 9. Now this right here is just going to say whatever item I stick in here, give it the proportions of 16 by 9, and that's a standard video's proportion. Now inside here is saying, okay, what do you want to embed? Well, we're just going to embed this as an iframe, and the parameters for this is class, and this is dependent on what you're trying to embed, but I happen to know that for YouTube videos, the one I love the most is embed responsive item, and the source, we just put the URL of the embedded video, so http www.youtube.com/embed/ that video code. Actually, let me looks good enough, don't need to clean it up. But now if you run this, check it out. Alright, so since this is responsive, whenever your screen is wide, it's going to take up the full width of the screen. So if we start to shrink this, instead of just getting cut off, since this is, I believe this video is 1920 by 1080, which is my entire computer screen, look what happens. So this is excellent no matter how big your screen is, especially recommended for tablets and phones, because look at that, nothing's getting cut off, you can play it, beautiful. So that is how you use images, responsive images, different image styles, and also how to embed responsive videos. And I know that this looks a little bit goofy with all the different repetitive classes, embed responsive 16 by 9 is better, blah blah blah, but hey, you gotta yell at the people who made Bootstrap, not me. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, see you next time. Alrighty hosses, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a navigation bar. And a navigation bar is that main menu bar at the top of the screen that is essentially the main navigation for your entire website. And as you notice, I took out that container class because up to now that container class has been the main parent element, but what we're going to do whenever we make a navigation bar is actually stick it inside a nav class. So it's kind of different, but I'll show you guys how it works. So in order to make it, make a nav tag, and the class for this is navbar default. So this first one just says that we're making a navigation bar, and the second one is the styling of it, in other words the color, but I'll show you guys how you can style it or give it a different color in just a second. Now inside here, again, like I said, this is where we're going to be putting our container, and I'm going to make a fluid container because I want this navigation bar to take up the entire width of the screen, and that's kind of standard for navigation bars. Usually you don't want them, just centered in the screen with a bunch of space to the left or right. So the class equals container fluid. Alright, now before you start adding the actual menu item buttons, what a lot of people like to do is they like to add their logo at the top left just to, I don't know, kind of help brand the website. So I'll just add a little comment, might be a little bit easier to read. And if you decide to do this, the div class is Navbar header, and that just lets Bootstrap know that this isn't an actual button for, you know, the menu that they're going to be clicking a lot. This is essentially just the logo, and you can actually, let me just add a dead link. So you could link it to like the home page or something, but I'm just gonna have a dead link for right now. And the class for this is Navbar brand. And I would just say, I don't know, the New Boston, all in caps. So again, this lets Bootstrap know that it's not part of the main, it's not like a regular generic menu item, it's something special, the header. And this right here gives it the styling. So the styling is going to make it stand out. It gives it like a little bold, and I think it changes the color slightly. So there you go. This is an optional logo. So now we can start adding the actual menu item button. So let me copy this. Menu items, and these are going to be your individual pages or different sections of the website. Now we're going to stick these inside a div, and inside this div we're going to have an unordered list. Now of course we're going to be putting all of our list items in here, but before we get to that, the class of the unordered list is navbar nav. There's a lot of redundant, you know, naming conventions in Bootstrap. That's one thing I don't like, but you know, what am I going to do about it? Nothing, so I'm just shut up. Alright, so inside here, of course, we need list items. And you know how sometimes when you click a menu item and the page you're on, it stays like highlighted, and that's just a little indicator of, okay, this is the current page that you have selected. If you ever want to achieve that effect, then you change the class to active. And again, this is just going to highlight the button that says, okay, this is the page you're on. And I don't know, it's just a little bit more clear for the user. Now, inside here, you're going to want to link to some page, whatever it is. I'll let you worry about that. And see, freaking autocorrect. So this is a generic one, and let me add a couple more just so it doesn't look too lonely. Now, of course, these two you don't want to be active. You only want to have one item active at a time, and that's because the user can't be on, you know, multiple different pages at a time. So I'll say that this one is about, and this one is contact. Alright, so do I got anything wrong? Hopefully not. Let's run it and see how it looks. So this right here, this is what I was talking about, the logo, which is technically called the Navbar header. And since we applied that class Navbar brand, that's why you see it's kind of bold and the text is a little bit different than this. And also, whenever I said that this first menu item was active, that's why we got that highlighting. And you know, it's so of course this would mean that I'm on the home page, and it's just a little indicator for the user. It makes it, you know, easier to understand. Now if I shrink these, check out what happens. So since this is responsive, instead of just cutting off the menu items, they actually collapse, so you never lose any of your items. Now I'm going to be showing you guys in a second, let's say that you had like 7 different items. Well, whenever you collapsed it and are looking at it on a phone, that means that most of your screen would just be a menu bar and you have to scroll way down for the content. So I'm going to show you guys how to add a button really easily, and then you can click it and it can toggle this menu visible and invisible, or hidden and not hidden, displayed, not displayed, whatever you want to call it. Alrighty hosses, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add a drop-down menu. So up to now we just made regular menu items, and I'm going to add another one, but instead of just going to a page, whenever the user clicks it, it's going to pull up a drop-down menu and they can select from some sub menu items. And before I actually get to that, I just want to change the default styling of this main navigation bar, because this light gray, I don't know, it just looks kind of wimpy to me. So instead of the navbar default styling, which we have right now, I'm going to change this to inverse. and that just inverses the color scheme, and I don't know, I just think it looks a little bit cooler, makes it pop out a little bit, easier to read. But you know, follow your heart, choose whatever one you like. Now let's go ahead and add that drop down menu. Now in order to do this, we're actually going to add a new, let me comment this, might be drop down menu. So we're just going to be adding another menu item to the list, but inside that menu item is actually another list, and that's going to be the drop down menu. So just like before, a regular menu item, but we have to give it a special class to indicate that it's a drop down. So not door up down, drop down. There you go, Bucky. Alright, so the first thing we have to take care of is what text do we want to appear on the button. So just like before, this one's home, this one's about, this one's contact. I'll say that it's like my profile, and then when you have a drop down list, you can like choose different, like your photos, your settings, whatever. And also, another thing I want to do is this. Right now, if we just write my profile and don't do anything else, whenever the user is looking at this navigation bar, they don't know which is just a regular menu item and what is a drop down item. So to the right of the my profile text, I'm going to add a little down arrow, and that's just a little indicator that, hey, whenever you click this, it's actually a menu and not just a direct link to some other page. So in order to do that, let me just add a dead link. And autocomplete is messing with me. And alright, so my profile, and let me just make that caret right now. Are you kidding me? Alright, so inside span, you write nothing, because what you do is you just actually change the class to caret, and that's not spelled like the vegetable, it's C-A-R-E-T. If you want to add another, icon, then feel free, but this is the one that I like. And also, this link right now is just going to act as a basic link, but we want to give it drop-down functionality. In order to do that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the class to drop-down minus toggle, and we also need another parameter called data toggle, and you set this attribute to drop-down. So now whenever we click this link, it doesn't treat it as a normal link, it's going to treat it as a drop-down and open up a menu that is inside this list. So let's actually go ahead and create that menu right now. Now it's going to be an unordered list, and our sub menu items, or the items on the drop-down menu, are going to go in here. And before we do that, we need to change one more class to let it know that, hey, this is a drop-down menu, and can you guess what this is? Drop-down menu. So now all we have to do is make our list items, and let me just copy some of these. So again, these are the items that are going to be on your drop-down menu, and I'll just say like friends, photos, settings. There you go. So there you go, kind of confusing, but hopefully when I run this, then you see that my profile, instead of being a normal link, it has a caret to the right, and I should probably add a space right after my profile. And this just makes it so that arrow isn't butted up right up against the text. So you see that, and now instead of just going to another page, whenever I click it, we get that drop down menu. Pretty sweet. Now let me show you one more thing since I have a little bit of time, and that is, how do you make it so that you have some items right here? So on my webpage, thenewboston.com, if you noticed, the logout link is to the right of all the other ones, because this is where you're going to be navigating most of the time. And if you ever want to log out, then you don't accidentally click it or anything. So I'll show you guys how to right align. Alright, so here are all your menu items, and this unordered list right here, think of this as for the left hand side. So if we want to get one on the right, we need to make another one, and let me just say right align, sline, right align. And now we need to make another unordered list and the class of this. Ready for some redundant typing. Navbar, navbar, right. See, could they not come up with some better naming conventions? But hey, I'm not complaining. Just saying, just saying. And now all we have to do is, just make any list item. So I'll say log out. So I'll build it like copying my website. And there you go. Here is our main navigation menu on the left, and also this additional one that is right aligned for the logout. And of course, if we ever want to add additional items on the right, we just copy this and add some more. But I only like to have one on the right because it looks kind of goofy if you add more than that. But now that you know the basics of how to create a drop-down menu and also how to right align certain menu items, we're ready to move on to the next part, and that is how to add that main toggle for mobile navigation. Alrighty, hosses, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to show you how to add a toggle button so your menu doesn't look horrible on mobile devices. So just right now, looking at it on a desktop or a laptop, the menu looks pretty sweet, but if you were to look at this on a phone, this is what it would look like. The menu would take up a third of the entire screen, and let's say that you had 8 items. Well, then you have to scroll way down before you see any part of the web page. So I'm going to show you guys how to add a button just like this, where you can click it and it can either collapse or expand your menu. So make this big again, hop back in our code and check it out. Now I reverted back to, I think it was tutorial number 6, 2 tutorials ago. In other words, I took out all the extra stuff like the drop down menu and the right align logout button. So this is just a really simple menu. I just wanted to use this as a starting point. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, here are the main menu items. Again, this is just the logo. Now we're going to add functionality to say whenever we click this button that we're going to be making in just a second, hide this section right here. And whenever we click it again, expand it. So we're essentially just going to be expanding and collapsing this. Now in order to do that, we need to change the div slightly. The first thing we need to do is for the class, we need to give it collapse so it's able to be collapsed in navbar collapse. Now another thing we want to do is this just gives it the functionality to be expanded and collapsed. We want to give it an ID so we can actually say, okay, this button is trying to collapse this, essentially just so we can target it. So main navbar. So whenever we click the button, we're going to say collapse. What do you want to collapse? Main navbar. And you put your button right inside the navbar header above your navbar brand, your logo, whatever you want to call it. And of course, it's a button, and it has 4 different attributes that we have to make. The first one is the type, and this is just button. Yes, this button is a button. The second one is the class, and this is navbar toggle. Now the third one is data toggle. Are you popping up? Nope. Data toggle, and this is collapse. And the last one is data target. So you know that this button is trying to collapse something. Let me type this so I don't get confused. Alright, so okay, this button is going to collapse something. What are you trying to target? Well, we are trying to target this div right here. So hashtag for the ID and main navbar, or whatever the ID of your div is. Now inside your button, we need to say, okay, what icon or text do you want to go on here? So what people usually do is, if I pull this up, you see that these toggle buttons, some people call these the hamburger icons, where they're just like 3 lines. And these are just, I don't know, it's kind of like the universal symbol for them. But for some reason, Bootstrap thought it would be funny to, not include the ability to have that icon easily, so we have to make it in kind of a weird way, and I'll show you how. So we have to make each line individually. Kind of weird, but that's what we got to do. And this is icon bar. So this is going to give us the top bun. This is going to give us the bottom, or excuse me, the meat, and this is going to give us the bottom bun. So this is just the design of the button. This is the overall button and the functionality, and whenever we click it, it's going to target this right there. So now if I run it, everything looks normal by default, but whenever we shrink it on a mobile device, look at that, we now get our button. So we can click it, expand it, click it again, and collapse it, and now our menu doesn't take up the entire screen. And just to show you guys what I was talking about, say that we removed one of these. You see how this button looks normal right now? Let me refresh it. We only have 2 lines on it. So I don't know why they just didn't make an easier way of doing this, but hey, you know, I'm not making Bootstrap, I'm just teaching it. So there you go. Hopefully you guys understand how to make navigation bars and toggle buttons, and yeah, pretty simple. See you next video. Alrighty guys, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about wells. And before we do, I want to mention that I'm going to keep the navigation bar in the rest of my tutorials that we made in the last video, because I don't know, I just think it will be a little bit cooler if it looks like we're making an actual website instead of just a bunch of different, you know, individual examples. So I set it up so I can type all of my demonstrations right here, and they're going to appear right here. But if you guys want to do the same thing as me, then just take your navigation bar and just stick it right above it. I'm going to keep it collapsed because we're not actually going to be tweaking any of the code in there, but you know, just want to show you guys what's going on. Alright, so make sure I got my tabs right. So a well is essentially just, it's kind of like a floating island. They look like these individual sections with a border and usually a gray background. And let me add a heading real quick. So wells are sections with borders. And by the way, is gray spelled with an A or an E? I want to get your guys' opinion. I never know how to spell it. I mean, I know that you can spell it either way and it's technically correct, but I don't know. Like, what's more common? Kind of bothers me. Moving on. Let's learn how to create a simple well and, you know, figure out what they actually look like. Now, just to make a real basic one, the class is well. Easy to remember. And I'll just write basic well. So this is the text that is going to appear inside it. And if I refresh, this is our heading. And as you can see, this is a basic well, just a floating island that's gray and it has a slight border. So whenever you have some content and you want to separate it from your main website, that is what you do. And there are a bunch of different types of wells that we can make. Aside from just a simple one, we can have well small, and this just kind of takes away some of that padding, makes it a little bit more condensed. And people use these a lot for alert boxes. So say that you're filling out a form to, let's say, sign up for a website. If you filled it out correctly, then a well would pop up when it might have like a green background, say congratulations, you signed up, now check your email to verify it. Or, you know, just a bunch of different examples, maybe a notification of one of your friends' birthdays, who knows. Possibilities unlimited. So anytime you want to create a well in that fashion, it's actually a different style. It's called an alert. So for the class, what one can I show you? I'll show you guys the success one. So alert, success. Now inside here, I'll just write like, how do you spell congratulations? C-O-N-R-A-T-U-L-A-T-O-N-S? Is that right? Hopefully. Alright, so congratulations, you just won the game. Now, actually just refresh this and check it out. So an alert, all it is a colored well. Now, another thing that you're going to want to do, whenever you pop these up, especially if you're making a single page app, you want to give the user the ability to close these. So maybe it's just a notification and you want to have an X on the right hand side, and whenever they click it, it goes away. So let me copy this one. Alright, so there's my success one. I'll make an info one. So info you can use whenever you just, want to give a little notification to the user. Obviously, they don't want these staying on, their web page forever. So I'll just be like, don't forget Kelly's birthday today. And again, this is just going to create a really basic well, but in order to add that X that you can click on, it's actually a link. So right before it, and I know it's coming after on the right hand side, but href, what the heck, cursor? It's obviously, not my cursor. I obviously just hit something wrong. Alright, so href, it's going to be a link. You might want to have this actually do something, you might not. In the class, you set to close. Now, one other thing that you're going to do, actually two other things. You want to have data, and it's not popping up, dismiss. So what this is going to do is it's going to dismiss the alert box. And the last thing is label, there we go, and this is closed. Make this a little bit easier to read. Alright, now inside your link, did it actually work? Impressive. What symbol do you want to appear as your link? Well, let's just have a X, and it's actually called times. So this is going to be HTML that's going to be rendered into a graphic. So if we refresh this, check it out. So this is that times, and it's called times because I guess you use it during multiplication. But whenever we click it, the link is going to make this disappear, just like that. Now, if you noticed, whenever I click it, it just disappears immediately. And a lot of people, what they like to do is have this fade out instead. So if you want to have it fade out, what you can do is this. It's really easy to change. So I'll keep that one, so whenever I post it on GitHub, you guys will have it. And let me just say danger. So info's blue, danger is going to be red. And what can we have the text on this say? Like, are you sure to your account? Alright, now inside this div, right after alert danger, we're going to add another class called fade space in. So it's two different classes. So now whenever I refresh this, check it out. So this blue one, whenever we close it, it's just going to pop away immediately. And this red one, you might have to look closely, but I'm going to click it and it fades out. If it was kind of hard to see on YouTube, then you can definitely see it great whenever you run it in person. But that is the basics of wells and alerts, and how you make your alerts closable, and also how to add a basic fading animation to your alerts. See you next time.